it's good, but I would give it like a C- overall.
Ooh. This works well for me for someone who I would say is younger and has not done a lot of self-analysis of them.
Really?
Good day and welcome to the Consultant of the Coach podcast. I'm here with my good friend Josh. How are you, my friend?
Great. How are you, Eric?
Good.
We're ready to rock and roll?
We're huge Lencioni fans. So we pre-ordered Lencioni's 6 Types of Working Genius. It came to my house last afternoon. You woke up yesterday morning and it magically arrived on your Kindle.
Magic in the Amazon Kindle. It's
And
amazing.
like everything, some amazing things, but also some problems. We're like, how in the world do we do this?
Yeah. Well, and I think if you're listening, if you're thinking about this book, hopefully we can give you some perspective on either how to use it or not to use it or what to think about it. So,
absolutely. And so, before we dive into it, we were thinking, okay, as it applies to the Christian life, or if it does, we were thinking of kind of the scripture passage out of 1 Corinthians 12. So, there's that passage that we're all different, and it says, "For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot should say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' that would make it any less part of the body. And if the ear should say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body.'" It's a really funny analogy in 1 Corinthians, because it's like the hand and the ears arguing back and forth. When we look at books such as Lencioni's 6 Types of Working Genius, it's kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. He's going to use something and say, hey, we have 6 different categories.
Yeah. Well, and I think for folks who are listening, you may have figured out by now, we like to, touch back to Scripture and kind of infuse that with the work we're doing. But the other thing is, you may have heard us use that scripture before, and if you haven't, you can go back and check out some similar but different content around, I would say, StrengthsFinder. We also did an unboxing of your geniuses a few weeks back, so that's out there now.
6 Types of Working Genius.
So if that sounds familiar to some of you, it's not because we have forgotten that we used that before, but it applies to a lot of the work we do in consulting and coaching. So we felt it was a good one to bring up again.
And one of the things I love about his books is he uses fables. Yep. And so it's one thing to say, hey, he has 6 new data points. No, but he uses a fable to tell a story of, hey, here is a advertising firm, and they have problems. The guy who owns it, the guy who's the CEO, does not have job satisfaction. What's he going to do?
Yeah, he's pretty frustrated about a lot of things, as you'll see, as we'll talk about today.
And so, the first overview of the book, what sticks out to you?
Yeah, I would say that I think the biggest takeaway I had was that this is a data point, right? So if you're looking for the solution to cure all of your ills, this is not it, right? It will give you a data point on your team, right? As we talked a little bit about, preparing for this, it gives you a perspective on I think it's probably more helpful to an individual leader on their own kind of guidance. In terms of managing your teams, you're not going to be able to do everything for your team with this one. It's either it requires, or as we'll get into, it sort of indicates you understand or have a lot of things in place, and or have several other data points like personality type, right, Myers-Briggs, and some other things. In my opinion, so it's good, but I would give it like a C-. It's like my overall.
Ooh.
Yeah. C-.
But you said data point. Did you not? Maybe is it because we didn't enjoy the fable enough?
No, the fable was fine, but it was not real. It was not real. It was nice, I think I could attune it to, if you took physics in high school or college. There's, at least when I did, there was physics B and physics C, and I was not smart enough for physics C. That's physics with calculus.
So we have normal physics,
physics
in a box, in a vacuum, and then
physics
the real physics, which we live in with calculus.
Yeah, and so the idea is you learn the basics of physics B, of the basic concepts of different things, and I don't remember much about physics B. I wasn't very good at it. But it was sort of in a vacuum, and you didn't have to worry about things like friction and other aspects that you would sort of solve with calculus. And so when I read this, as we'll get into the fable, at least the work part this week, and we can talk about some other parts next week, I thought it was fine, but it was very much, it reminded me of physics B. It was like, great, but this isn't reality. Like, there's very few organizations in the world that are this functional in terms of the personalities in place and relationships and establishment, and no mention of personality issues, not to mention personal issues outside of work that can influence stuff, not to mention how much people change over time, not to mention politics, power play, incentives for money. I mean, like all these things we could talk about that I thought, well, it's nice. It's a physics B, scenario. It's not a real
in a vacuum
world.
It's
in a
physics
vacuum.
in a big
Exactly. It was in a vacuum.
What goes in motion stays in motion, never slows
stops,
down.
right? Yeah, exactly. So that was,
and
that was my takeaway. C minus.
C minus, and I would say C minus.
You can give it a better grade too.
Well, I was going to give it like an A minus until I heard
That's
you talking.
Okay. Go for it. That's all, we can disagree.
No, but I think you're right.
Well, I think I'm right too.
And
but
part of it was I almost wish, like you take a great storyteller like a Donald Miller. I'm like, if he had told the fable, I would have been engaged. Or just think of, Tolkien.
Yeah.
And it needed a better fable because I actually, as I've been sitting in the 6 types of working genius, I actually think all 6 types work within business.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
They do.
It just needs a better fable.
It works as a data point. No, I would say it works as a data point. I don't think the fable. I think the fable represents the work well. I think it's just it's a data point among which do you need to have context and friction and politics and reality. Like there's too much in the real world. It's a frictionless environment.
Okay, so we're going to start with the good first or the bad first?
Oh, I think I dug into the bags. Maybe I should go to the good first.
Okay, what aspect of this, as you're from a consulting perspective?
Yeah.
I have a coaching perspective next. From a consulting perspective, where does this work? The 6 types of working genius.
Well, first of all, I'd say as a consultant, if this fable was real, I would be out of a job because
Here, read this $25 book.
Yeah, read this $25 book, and you don't need to
problems.
hire me, right? So, because if every organization was as simple, but I think where I think this works well is definitely resonated with the struggles early in a career of bouncing from job to job, quickly being dissatisfied. I think that was really helpful and sort of like, oh yeah, I'm resonating there. I'm tracking with that. And I say that because I think where this is valuable is if you are an individual leader and trying to suss out where you are at your best and the type of work that you're both a genius. What's the second one? I always forget the middle one.
What do you mean?
You have your geniuses, you have an next one, and you have your frustrations.
Oh, your geniuses, your competencies, and then your frustrations.
Yeah, so if you're trying to figure out where to spend most of your time in your geniuses, where you can be competent but should spend some but not all your time, and then where to sort of avoid on the frustration side, I think as an individual leader, this can help. And I also think in small companies that are well established in terms of the leadership team, there's a high degree of trust. Mm-hmm. There's some level of establishment in terms of people have been in the roles for a while. There is a fairly low level of politics, and there's clarity on the roles. This can be a helpful sort of add-on. But my assumption there is, from a consulting perspective, and this is me thinking about my clients, we've already done a ton of work baseline to sort of get them there, right?
Yes.
To understand the right personalities, how we mix, what are the roles, what's the strategy, like all that stuff has to be figured out, I think, before this emerges from the surface. Now, someone could argue we do this first, it sort of accelerates it. Maybe.
Possibly.
But I think you'd have to get a lot of stuff lined up. So the companies that are small and have sort of a high degree, like I said, high degree of trust among the team. But that's my takeaway. What do you think? Where does this work well for you?
This works well for me for someone who I would say is younger and has not done a lot of self-analysis of their self.
That's interesting. Tell me more about that. I disagree, so tell me more.
Okay,
I could be wrong.
So this is what. So he obviously there's 6 working types: wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. But the person I was thinking of were my 2 daughters. I'll give you an example. So even though I'm not going to put them in terms of the 6 type of working geniuses, my second to oldest daughter is a very talented athlete, but it's coming down to almost 2 gifts. There's track and field, and she's a discus thrower, but then she's also a swimmer. And in her opinion, everything's even on the table. But what's
in terms of her ability,
am I going to be a collegiate swimmer or a collegiate discus thrower, or I'm going to, and where I would use this is this current swim season of hers is thoroughly mediocre. It's not that she's on varsity, might even make state, but that's not going to get her to college in swimming. So that would kind of be the working competency. Whereas her track and field skills actually might get her to college. That would be a working genius. But a lot of people, they think, well, I'm good at everything because my parents told me I'm good at everything. And
my mother tells me I'm special too.
Josh, you are special.
Oh, thank you.
But what it does is I think it helps us divide, what we really are good at, whereas what's a frustration.
Yeah.
And I think it divides it up really nicely. And this is what I like, because I was like, I loved it, and then I didn't like it. And then he kind of brought me around towards the end of the book again. I'm like, you know what? I think Lencioni's right here in these 6 categories.
Yeah, I think the categories aren't bad, but I think what I just heard you say was you were applying, correct me if I'm wrong, the concepts of helping your children think through the fact that they have a genius. You aren't going to use with their specific language. You're not going to be thinking through with your daughter around, now, does discus make you a discerner, or does it make you... So, like, there's a difference there. You weren't going to give her the 2 geniuses out of the 6.
No, absolutely not.
You're more thinking about it from a helping
how
children
do you
think
apply
through...
it?
Well, apply the higher level concept, which is you're better at some things than others.
Correct. Absolutely.
Not applying
and
the specific
and that's
geniuses.
kind of from a coaching perspective.
Yeah.
Because people come to me and say, hey, I have... Typically, they'll say, I need coaching, but it's because I have a problem in my life or a problem at work.
Sure, there's a same thing for consulting. You don't come unless there's a problem.
And
sure.
then you look at it, well, what's causing the problem? Because typically it's not as simple as, hey, just hit this button or put this modifier on a claim. There are all sorts of other things playing into scenarios.
Yeah, which actually confirms for me that if you're coaching from a athletic coaching, business coaching, team leading, this is another tool in the tool belt.
Absolutely.
Right? There is a general notion that, like even he says, I think the first 2 things I like in the introduction, there's 2 things this is based on. People who utilize their natural God-given talents are much more fulfilled and successful. I don't think we disagree with that. Teams and organizations that help people tap into their God-given talents are much more successful and productive than those that don't. I don't disagree with that. I think that the specific way this plays out is one of several tools, one of several data points that you could use along the journey of trying to both identify those things in yourself and for your teams or for your clients. So yeah, I agree.
So let me tell you my number one problem, and
Sure.
I don't have an answer to this yet. My number one problem is I've figured out a lot of other personality tests: DISC, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. I use another one called a VARC, and I've used probably 7, 8, 9 different ones. I think great. One more personality. StrengthsFinder.
Yep.
One more to figure out. Great. It's like the next class you need for your degree. Do I really need another personality StrengthsFinders 6 types of working genius?
Yeah.
Do I?
I don't know. That's why I went for the C-.
Yeah.
It is just, it's another tool. It's helpful to have the language, but at the same time, how much marginal value is there relative to depending on, like if you've never done any of the things you just said, like of all the things you just said, and someone's listening to this and they go, I have no idea what a DISC profile is, and Enneagram, and Myers-Briggs, and StrengthsFinder, like, okay, this might actually do a ton of value because you haven't done any of that work before.
Absolutely.
Right? But you have to do the other ones too.
But what I do like about this is there's tiers. So StrengthsFinders, you have your top 5, your bottom 5.
Right.
Well, that kind of has tiers too.
Yeah.
Your top 5, your bottom 5. But this is like, there's only 6.
Yeah.
6 is better than 34.
Well, see, maybe. See, I like having 34.
You're like Baskin and Robbins, you have nothing. StrengthsFinders at least has 34, not 31.
Right. Well, I mean, like, I don't see. It's funny you said that because I actually don't like the 6 because it's too simplified for me. Like, people aren't that simple, and while I hate to sound like a skeptic, I've met a lot of people, and frankly, a lot of people I've met I would not consider geniuses in any category, much less 2.
God made them too.
He did. He just didn't make them geniuses. Like, there's a difference. Like, so I hate the term, and that sort of predisposes me to not liking it, I think. But that feels like a marketing term, to be honest. It's another reason it went from C to C-, probably.
Well, I might be able to get you up to an A- once I apply it to our team.
No way.
But so this
You'd have to really prove that to me.
Well, let me tell you where I'm stuck.
Yep.
Because I'm trying to like this. So I oversee an organization with
C-, by the way, doesn't mean I don't like it.
That's true.
Okay, keep going.
I could coach you on that.
It's a bell curve. It's like right in the middle of the bell curve.
Okay.
Yeah.
But where I'm at is I have, if you look at my entire organization, there's about 75 employees, depending on how they are. I'm looking at what areas of my organization are underperforming, and do I have the wrong people on the bus? But then this is where I'm stuck. Which types of working genius would fit in those roles? So I do have a few departments there underperforming, but is it because I really need someone with tenacity and instead I have someone with the gift of enablement? But then I'm like, well, what gift would work in that department? And I don't know yet.
Yeah, though that's one of the things I saw was how to apply this to anything but your leadership team. Right, because you get down to groups who are sort of processing widgets and steps and repeatable things as they should. Those are,
your factory workers.
Yeah, I mean, for better or for worse in the American business and probably worldwide business, the further you go down the org chart, the less I would say critical thinking is required, right? And I was imagining, even take that to extreme, I was trying to imagine like how would I apply this to a fast food worker? Right, or pick your the very frontline minimum wage worker you could think of. I was going to the airport yesterday on a client visit, right? Thinking about just people in the airport, thinking how in the world would they apply a working genius to a job that is extremely task driven, right? Like how I direct the plane out of its gate as the guy who holds the batons, like who cares, and how is that going to improve their life? Other than maybe they don't like that job, but
and decide what they're going to go into.
Maybe, right? But is there like a working genius for someone who actually should be doing that the rest of their life? Like, oh, no, you're actually made to wave the batons and guide the planes because you have the gift, genius of discernment? What would it be? I don't even know.
Tenacity? Just showing up and doing it. Because, I mean, if they don't finish the project, the plane doesn't get to the gate. Or it crashes.
It's true. So, I mean, I guess that's why I was struggling with how wide is this really useful, right? That's why I was like, I tried to come up with where I thought it was useful, but I sort of felt like I landed on a very narrow application, not a wide application. But StrengthsFinder is very wide.
But the cool thing is the fable about the book. It talks about kind of like a church group where I can just see the little old ladies complaining in the corner. You have the priest on this side, and it, at least in the fable, because it's a fable, physics type B with no friction, and he makes it work out perfectly in the fable
because it's a frictionless environment. Yeah, I think we landed on a lot of similar things. It was an interesting read. I think we have more to talk about, as we go here and sort of dig into it. But I think there's
let me tell you the tangent I went down.
Yeah.
And the thing. So if you haven't bought the book, go out and get the book.
Oh, really? I'm for a C-. I'm not sure they would.
No, I think
you're recommending they buy it, huh?
I am recommending they buy it.
I would recommend it under the caveat that it fits the description I gave earlier.
If you have a business that has more than 2 employees, you need to buy the book.
And less than 20, less than 50.
No, I would just say more than 2, you need to buy the book.
You have 75. Yeah, no, I would say, I think it's a small company.
And let me tell you why. Yeah. So on pages 196 and 197, it just puts all 6 types on 2 pieces of paper. What I did was I went through and I went, at least with my leadership staff, and I said, I put in blue areas of genius. So I put a couple employees and what their area of genius is, and then in black I put areas of competency, and then in pencil, because I wanted to do red, but I couldn't find red, so they're pencil. and then I did areas of frustration, and it was really fascinating. In my organization, galvanizing and tenacity is really, really weak, and then the other 4 is really, really strong. So
That's
this is where I need.
You might have a problem there.
Well, I'm going to have to figure that out. I'm going to have to do some
No,
research.
that's interesting. I mean, it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a problem, but that's good.
I might be able to make a few small moves, and it might turn out to be very, very profitable for our business. I don't know. It's one of those things. I do not know.
Yeah.
And what's it going to take?
Well, I think that. Yeah, I like that you did that, because I think that. It definitely sounds like it illuminated a gap, right? Similar, I think, in the Fable, where I think they had 4 with the same one in terms of a focus area or a genius, right? But only a couple others like 1, and how do you manage that? And I think,
exactly. What do you do with the problem? And so this is where I liked the concept. And then what I was doing is I was taking this area of problem within our business, but I was also applying it to other personality profiles such as StrengthsFinder or DISC assessment or Myers-Briggs. Would those fix my problem as well? And the answer is no.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so.
What if you made sure you had different strengths appropriated to those areas? Could you even crosswalk the strengths to the geniuses?
Ooh,
That'd be interesting.
Define crosswalk. I know what you're talking about, but let's say when you say crosswalk, StrengthsFinder, and 6 types of working genius, what do you mean?
Yeah, what I was thinking about was, could those 6 types of genius be effectively categories for several of the 34 strengths? And could you actually sort of bucket those or not? I haven't looked at them closely. I have to go back and double check and sort of think through that. Maybe
that's an interesting thought. Can you crosswalk StrengthsFinders with 6 types of working genius?
And then you don't need to buy both books. You can just buy one and tune into our podcast.
I mean, possibly.
Or we're going to write that book.
Either way, there's a lot going on. And it's a lot. I don't have an answer. Yeah. So this is where I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think we should just keep chewing on it and come back next week and do a little bit more digging into this topic and keep working on it.
And this is how, when we do read a book, if you're unsure, don't just say, I dislike it, unless it really is a bad book. Say, I need to sit on this a little bit more.
Yeah.
What does it look like? Read it and take it and interview people at your company. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And it might come to you the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where, hey, the book came out yesterday. Well, how fast can we get through this? But at the same time, what's it going to look like in the next 1 month, 3 month, 9 month, 12 months?
Yep. Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. And I would say for those of you who might be listening to this, just go ahead and shoot us back any feedback in terms of, I would say, things you're learning about this book, or if there's a way, send us a message on other books you might want us to talk about, especially if you know they're coming out. We'll jump right on them and push those out quick. So let us know if there's other topics or books you want us to review for you like this, if it's useful.
But in the meantime, do buy the book. It's well worth your $25.
On the Kindle, it's only $15.
Oh, there you go. Good deal.
It's even better.
Well, good. Well, hey, in the meantime, go to theconsultantcoach.com. And also, between this week and next week, Josh and I are going to argue about this some more. So we'll see next week exactly if we can come to an agreement. What do we do with this?
We agree on a lot.
We do.
We disagree on a lot, too. It's good.
Until next week.
Absolutely. Oh, until next week? We're going to agree more or less?
Yeah, we'll find out. That's next week.
Come back and check it out.
Okay. Until then.
Take care, everybody.